The part cost 57 cents per vehicle. But in 2005, aware that it had a problem with faulty ignition switches in some cars, General Motors decided 57 cents, in its words, was an unacceptable cost increase. 9 years later, 13 deaths have been linked to the defect. Millions of cars have been recalled. Today, the company's new CEO was in Washington facing tough questions and saying she was sorry. Our coverage begins with Paul Hunter. Paul.
Hey, Peter, think about it. You're driving down a highway or a road and your car just suddenly loses power and stops without warning. It's a problem GM knew about in some of its cars for years and effectively did nothing about it.
So you went with an American car, huh?
I did. It's a Chevy Cobalt.
In its day, it was a super-selling, inexpensive, trendy little car. And as it turns out, deadly. Over the years, 13 deaths have been linked to a defect in the Cobalt and other small cars. A faulty ignition switch would kill the engine, the power steering and brakes, and the airbags without warning. Imagine that. What's more, GM knew of its problems perhaps as far back as 2001, and even when it fixed it in 2006, it didn't tell those who'd bought the older cars, let alone replace them. On Capitol Hill in Washington today, families of those hurt and killed came to express outrage and demand answers.
I close my eyes and think about how he died, and it's not fair.
Inside the Capitol, the new CEO of GM faced lawmakers dismayed that a simple fix had been ignored.
A piece that cost pennies.
Stunned, it seemed, that GM broke even its own rules.
The company installed an ignition switch it knew did not meet its own specifications.
GM announced just last month it would recall 2.6 million cars with ignition trouble, and though the issues predate the current CEO, who took over in January, Mary Barra today apologized.
I am deeply sorry.
But in pledging to find answers, Barra had few to offer.
Why in the world would a company with the stellar reputation of General Motors purchase a part that did not meet its own specifications?
I want to know that as much as you do.
When pressed on other details, not least, why didn't GM just replace the switch when it knew there was trouble?
I do not know the answer to that.
One lawmaker labeled some of her testimony gobbledygook. Barra did announce GM has hired lawyer Ken Feinberg, who negotiated settlements after the 9/11 attacks and the BP oil spill. But she gave few details on what GM expects him to do in this case. Meanwhile, there's a criminal investigation. Lawsuits are underway, and all of it comes at a time that GM's having all kinds of trouble with some of its other cars. So far this year alone, Peter, GM has recalled more than 6 million vehicles.
All right, Paul. Thank you. Paul Hunter in Washington tonight.